I'm Tony. I'm the owner of Healthy Alternative. One of the questions we get almost on a daily basis is about probiotics. So I'm going to give you a little brief introduction and discuss which ones we like the best and why and what kind of types there are. So essentially, there are two types that you're going to see. You're going to see the ones that are refrigerated and then the ones that are non-refrigerated. The big difference is there's a way to shelf stabilize, and there's and numerous ways to shelf stabilize, and then there's the refrigerated ones that literally start dying the second that they get out of manufacturing process. So when it says 50 billion at date of manufacture, it all depends on how that has been handled till it gets to us. We know we handle it properly, and some manufacturers will send it in dry ice to make sure they're chilled. But you have to be careful when you're buying it from some different retailers. If it is a refrigerated one, how are they handled? Is it good to buy them in the summertime? They're sitting in a UPS truck overnight. If they're not shipped refrigerated, there's going to be some die-off. So how do they keep them shelf stable? Kyolic, who makes a brand called Tiodophilus, you can see we have a ton of it here, is my favorite. It is shelf stable, and they have a patented process on extracting moisture from the bacteria to make sure that it is shelf stable. It'll test, let's say for example, 3 billion in this particular one. It'll test 3 billion today, and 3 years from now it'll test 3 billion. So they've done a really good job. It's patented. Matter of fact, they get very nervous when you try to figure out how they do it. So in their process, there's a couple reasons why I prefer Tiodophilus, and I'll explain those. One, they're the only ones that really do a full human strain. So what that means is if they've gone through the intestinal tract of a human back in the 50s, extracted the bacteria out of the live human. I know this doesn't sound very appealing, but they've extracted the live bacteria and they've colonized those on beds of rice starch, literally football field lengths long. So you don't have to worry about gluten issue, and sometimes some people ask if they're gluten-free and what have you. It depends on what the food is. All of these probiotics, whether refrigerated or not, will put food in the capsule so that the bacteria has something to eat so it doesn't die. All right, so they use rice starch, and that's how they grow it. So you'll see there's a 9 strain here. Their primary one is a 3 strain. So what they've done is they've taken the most dominant strains in the gastrointestinal tract, in the large intestine as well as the small intestine, and they've colonized them and they've been able to stabilize them. So in each of these bottles, they're going to have one of those little moisture packets you see in all the multivitamins. Whatever you do, keep that in there. Don't throw that away, because we want to keep this. You don't want to refrigerate these. So if you travel, over time you'll accumulate some of those little moisture packets. I always take the old bottle and put the moisture packet in the new bottle, so just to make sure that that's going to stay moisture free. So moisture is going to be the one that's going to make this break down. So not only is it human strain, but one night at a convention I had dinner, and the person sitting across from me was a guy by the name of Dr. Weber, Mark Weber. And he's spent his whole life, all he does is study bacteria and bugs in the gastrointestinal tract. Doesn't sound like fun to me, but obviously it was fun for him. And during dinner, which is kind of an unusual topic to talk about during dinner, we talked about optimal dosages, optimal bacteria. So even though you'll see Lactobacillus acidophilus in a human tract, well, it's also Lactobacillus acidophilus lives in a cow, it lives in a goat. So there's different sources for Lactobacillus acidophilus, which is the primary strain. These are human strain, and even though it's Lactobacillus acidophilus, the bioavailability for those lines of bacteria to live and colonize in the human intestinal tract is better than that would be of a goat or a cow or whatever, even though it's the same strain. So if you turn your intestines inside out, you got these little things called villi, and that's where these things colonize, and that's where they like to live. There are lots of strains that you'll see out there in the probiotic lines that don't colonize. They don't live in the human, they can't live there and grow and multiply because they're not indicative and not indigenous to the human intestinal tract. So that's why I like these, because they're human strain. They know where to live. They go like to live. What Dr. Weber told me during dinner, he goes, it's great to have a 50 billion. This one, I pulled a couple of refrigerated ones out, okay? And 50 billion and 90 billion versus 3 billion. We like the higher doses for people who are coming off of a round of antibiotics. You know, antibiotics, just what it says, not only does it kill bad bugs, it kills good bugs too, and these are considered bacteria, good bacteria versus bad bacteria. So it wants to kill everything. The higher doses we'll use also for people that are radiation, chemotherapy, which just destroys the intestinal flora in your gastrointestinal tract. So we like to have higher doses in those cases, and then you go down to a more reasonable dose after you feel that you're not having as much bloating and gas or constipation, whatever kind of side effects you're going to have from being on antibiotics. Antibiotics are grossly overprescribed in the United States as well as even in China. They've tested waterways in China and found large levels of antibiotics and stuff in there. So I like to refrigerate it for certain things. If you can handle them properly in higher doses, are they going to colonize? A lot of them will not. Are they going to be able to eat up yeast and other debris that's in the gastrointestinal? Yeah, absolutely. So those are, you have to just know that I like them for when you're compromised, higher doses. These guys, they make a 3 billion. If you take a 3 billion a couple times, 3 times a day, you're getting just what you need in my opinion. This is my favorite one, Chi09. This is a 9 strain. It's the one I personally use. I've got one in here. It's got digestive enzymes for people who are bloating and gas. The probiotics itself will address that over time anyway. But with all the toxics and toxins and so forth in our diet and the atmosphere and so forth, all those things will kill the good bacteria in your gastrointestinal tract. So having a probiotic is important. Now, you've seen a lot of stuff about prebiotics now, and that's essentially the food that helps your own gastrointestinal tract grow the good bacteria. Some people, because of their diet, their gastrointestinal tract's been compromised for years. And what ends up happening, those little villi we're talking about, well, yeast starts to grow, and it's like putting little mittens on these little villi. And it's hard for these guys to colonize with Candida albicans, which is very, very common in the United States, for them to be able to colonize. So there's things that you can do to kill that yeast down so you have the space for these things to continue to recolonize. Generally, in high levels, a month or 2 months would be good. There are some. This is a soil-based microorganism from Garden of Life. It does a very good job of breaking down debris. Sometimes someone's got a diseased gut, or they haven't done any kind of colon cleansing. They got waste packed between these villi. This does a good job of cleaning that out, but this doesn't colonize, and it doesn't, it's good for taking out material that's trapped in between the villi, as in all these are. I don't like this long term. This would be short term. I would recommend first a colon cleanse. They're not like they used to be 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they used to call them colon blow for a reason. They were very aggressive. You would miss work because you didn't want to soil yourself at work. Now they're much more mild. The fibers are better. The laxatives they use are more mild, and they just do a better job. So that would be where I would start. After you go through that 10 or 14 day process, or even 30 days, then you go to you refluoridate. You put the good bacteria back in your gut. So that's where I would start. And you may want to initially start with, like a 50 billion. This is women's formula. They have them for men's formula and women's formula. Yes, we are different gastrointestinally as well as many other ways. And women who have been prone to having a lot of yeast problems vaginally, their probiotics are very good for that, female-wise. So I'd start with a higher dose, and then I'd go to the maintenance dose. Now, there's a proper way to take probiotics and an improper way to take probiotics. Stomach acid is detrimental to your intestinal flora. That's why your stomach won't open up until it sees that everything has been neutralized. The stomach acid has been neutralized by the food you've ingested. So What I find works the best is taking on a completely empty stomach with just enough water to get it down, or at the end of a meal. Some of these things will actually say, take with a meal. Well, then you got stomach acid, you got food in there. It's going to want to break down the food. It's going to, stomach acid will kill some of it. That's not really what you want. So just enough water. I set my little bottle of Coyodophilus 9 next to my toothbrush. So I take a couple in the morning, with just a little water to get them down after I brush my teeth. And I take it the same thing at night. And that seems to work really, really well for me. And anybody that I've recommended that to, they seem to like that.